coming on Team 5's presentation. We really appreciate that enthusiasm. I'm Zara.
Natalie.
Mike.
Emily.
And we're Team 5. So today you all have heard a lot of information, a lot of ideas that potentially will become reality. So I want you to take a moment to close your eyes and think about each person's presentation and what they propose to be implemented. What does that look like? What does it sound like with children engaging in that? All right, I want you to keep that vision in your head because we're going to add to that. And when you put that all together, you're going to get this amazing picture of all the work that we've done throughout this semester. So keep that vision in your head and we'll add on to that. Our group's vision was to cultivate the Waldorf outdoor space to foster each student's ability to think, that's with their head clearly, feel with compassion with their heart, and act with their hands with purpose in the world. Our mission was to create outdoor classrooms that incorporated free play space and mindful design landscape that stimulate interaction and education while fostering internal and external harmony. Our clients let us know that their concerns were with water management, clear border lines, clear trails and walkways, and controlling invasive species and traffic. And today we will address all of that while going into detail around our design area, which was the garden.
No, before that, let's go into the stakeholders. So, of course, we have the children, we have the admin, we have the teachers, we have the community, but also something that really wasn't touched upon is actually the Our House community, like the school over here, and so actually physical structures and communities of people that are within the space that are not interacting with the space in the same way that the Waldorf community is interacting with the space. And so that's something that we specifically want to address, of really building more of a community with the other actors right across the street over here, across Kirk Road, and with Our House down there by the garden, which is of course our focus. So those are kind of like this, like we kind of are having more of a community angle as we go through this, of how we actually build that.
Okay, so I'm going to go back over our site analysis. So in our site analysis, we have 3 zones, which is, we were trying to simplify it a little bit. So zone 1 is red, and that's weekly or daily use. Zone 2 is more like weekly use, and 3 is like hardly ever used, and that's the green. And then this is water. That's actually the creek. This is the flow of water. This is where the wind comes into the site. The sun in the winter and summer, right? And these are muddy spots. So, our design directives: to resolve drainage issues, traffic jam solutions, useful plant production, site cohesion. We want the whole site to flow together more readily and to be used a lot more all around. And curriculum and site integration. So some of the permaculture principles that solve these problems, which we will touch on again later, are observe and interact. So we want the children to observe and interact the garden year-round. So they would be observing useful plant production. The curriculum would be more integrated into the site. Produce no waste is another one that we would like to teach children. And we'll touch more on how we're going to actually reduce waste. And integrate rather than segregate. So we want to integrate the whole site and also integrate the community members and maybe even Our House and the kids that go there into hanging out in the garden. So I think that's that.
So now we're going to move on to the conceptual master plan. I'm nervous and very sweaty, and I guess I can smell that. So you're going to notice in this, you're going to notice in our conceptual master plan that it fits in very well with everyone else's plans, which is really awesome. I don't know how we all have this like collective consciousness to create this site together, but yeah. So you'll see, we're gonna focus on the water issue first, since that's what kind of was the main priority for our site. So one of the solutions to that is putting paths on contour, which we've already heard about earlier. We demonstrated one of those in our conceptual plan. We didn't want to get super detailed because it would just get really cluttered. So the one site, I'm not using that. So the one site that we put on, the one site that we did put on contour was the one that was kind of going from the bottom of the admin lot here straight down to the glade. We tried to loop that around more towards where the playground is right now, because we walked that site and that's kind of where it's the most even. Realize it does cut through the playground right now, but we can kind of move the playground maybe south, kind of like Becca's group was talking about, expanding that area down south. And that trail we're actually calling the Birds and Bees Walk. And
So just naming the trails. I think we all were kind of speaking, so it's kind of using the trails and naming them to kind of connect whatever are going to be the types of gardens you're planting, but to have cute names. And I kind of also like the idea of maybe it's a competition and everybody kind of puts in brainstorming ideas of how to get that done. But we just liked Birds and Bees Walk, Creek Walk, we'll get into that. But those are just ones that would connect the spaces.
Right, so there's going to be the other trail that comes down here, and this trail, we didn't name them right now. We'll leave that up to whatever the school community decides is the best name for those walks. One that we did add and we're pretty adamant about is the Creek Walk.
Mm-hmm.
So down here at the garden, as you're walking to the garden from the glade, there's a really, really muddy patch. And that's kind of where we're going to have like a little boardwalk area, so that we're kind of elevated above that. Because right now there's gravel there, but if you've been down to the garden today, you'll notice there's gravel, but it's also very muddy still.
Yeah.
So kind of
we kind of see it as they were trying to address the muddiness, which is really one of the muddiest paths in the site. And so they laid the gravel on there. The gravel didn't do too much. So that's a little observe and interactive kind of seeing that there's a limit to what that gravel could actually function as, which is why so then over here, kind of a last stage, even after when we get through the water stuff, but the boardwalk would kind of be the last resort to kind of not have everybody stepping in mud on their way.
And we also wanted to add a trail that goes from the garden path down to the creek and back up to the trail again. Kind of let the kids interact with that creek site there, because I mean it's a little gem in an urban environment that we're not really utilizing right now. So it'd be good to have that interaction for the kids in that riparian buffer zone. So another water management strategy we have is swales. We've talked about the divergent and the retention swales. So we have them placed strategically. They're not to scale, but they are placed strategically where there's slopes, where there's water just rushing downhill. So we're hoping to kind of pool up the water in those zones and let it percolate through the soil, as opposed to rushing along, taking all the topsoil, taking the mulch away. So maybe we'll be able to do less mulching, because it seems like you guys are constantly mulching here. So if we can cut back on that labor, that'd be a great benefit. And then the glade, so like the swales, the pads on contour, that's to reduce the water problem in the glade. But since we've learned in the past month or two that maybe there's a spring there, so what if we turn that problem of a soggy area into a resource for the school? So what if we were able to install like a freshwater spring pump or some sort of well system there, so the school could have fresh water from on site, as opposed to taking chemical laden water from the municipality. So after do all the testing and whatever that is, but that would be an awesome resource for the school, because you've already potentially got fresh water on site.
And it reminds, I think sometimes in this day and age, young children and adults alike forget that these things come from the earth, because it comes out of our faucet. So they're not recognizing as quickly that this is a resource that is not plentiful, but plentiful enough, and it comes from the earth, which I think lends to different types of thinking when it comes to the learning and the knowledge that they're gaining, is reminding them of these very essential things that the earth provides us with.
Awesome. So then, that's basically our water management strategies for right now. I'm going to touch on the invasive species removal. So we all know there's English ivy, there's mahonia, Japanese honeysuckle, lots of different types of, 2 different types of privet, glossy privet, Chinese privet. So if we can cut back on that using biological mechanisms that aren't polluting our planet, that aren't super expensive, using goats would be an awesome alternative way of removing those species. You know, definitely a natural way that's been used for thousands of years, but we kind of don't do that here because we like things done like that, and we like to pump fossil fuels into things for some reason. Anyway, so yeah, goats would get things that are kind of like maybe your knee and up. In my experience working with goats, they aren't really that great at getting English ivy. That's kind of like the last thing that they'll do, because they're more browsers, so they're like eye level and up. They'll climb trees, they'll do all sorts of things, but sheep would also work for removing the ground there, so the English ivy basically. But I just put cute goats there because they're cute goats.
Yeah. No, but also that this is a place where like the English ivy, I mean, this is like a very heavy area, as well as clearing out the area by the creek walk or the proposed creek walk, because this is kind of just like wild bush at this point that would really need to get thinned out to even create a possibility for a path.
And if you've never done any sort of understory removal before, you will be amazed how much open space there is afterwards. Like, it is day and night. So like I just took a walk down there right now to the glade, and it's mostly privet around the glade. And if there was no privet there, it would just be tree trunks. So what's really important is that you're planting something as soon as possible afterwards, or else you're letting the seasons go by and allowing those invasives to regrow, because they do hold a lot of energy in their root systems. So if you just kind of knock them back once, they'll resprout. So it's best to continually remove them, whether it's once with goats and a second, third, and fourth time by hand in more targeted areas, but also replanting with native vegetation. And then we kind of put in our border here, which is that 15-foot screen between the residential neighborhoods and the schoolyard. So we just chose one species for that 15-foot barrier, and that was an American holly. It's native, it's evergreen, it's kind of pokey, so maybe kids or other people won't be trying to go through those bushes. And they have really awesome bright red berries, so they're kind of ornamental as well. And last but not least, berries. So where there was privet in the glade, we would love to add either native berry bushes or other sorts of edible berries. Boysenberry, marionberry, tayberry, blueberry, blackberry, raspberry, all that fun stuff. Lots and lots of berries. Because they can produce plenty in a shaded environment. If you're in full sun, maybe you'll get a whole gallon bucket of berries in a season, but if they're in like half shade, you get half a gallon. But you know, half a gallon of bucket's better than 0. So we're proposing berry it up.
And then in addition to the edible forest along here, of like the second, we kind of did an example. Everyone was kind of saying we're going to continue to use like the Waldorf shape as signage throughout. But then here we say, like this one was about the serviceberry, and we kind of are giving more information about it, so it kind of has more of like a botanical garden you're actually giving, and whether you're addressing different points. Because here, I mean, this is like, I mean, there was only so much space that we could fit stuff here. So we say native to Georgia, it's a colorful berry, loved by birds and humans, tastes similar to a blueberry, rich in antioxidants, known in Chinese medicine and Native American healing to build the blood and nourish vital energy, enjoy its white flowers in spring. So there's all kinds of information, but you can also use like the vines to actually weave baskets, and so there's so much information, but that each point we kind of address head, hands, and heart in terms of how you use, because you can only use so much information, but you could also develop a double signage system where you're lifting, and so there's a lot of it, but the educational signage is kind of a crucial point, and I think we all are on board with that. With that idea.
It's not just the garden, it's not just the glade, that's everywhere on the site.
But it can also be like homework tasks for all of the different groups. Go and research what are the uses for, and so it's like really a kind of community generative education project
And
where they're
taste
coming
testing.
up with it, and taste testing. So we really love that idea, and we want it incorporated everywhere.
And we also highlighted on here little spiral herb gardens. These aren't necessarily spiral herb gardens, but that's the archetype for a garden.
That's our symbol.
That's our symbol. So we basically put one near the beehive because we want to have a pollinator garden there. Lots and lots of different types of flowers, so we can get this awesome wildflower honey. It's super, super yummy if you haven't had it. And then we also are putting gardens or proposing gardens in the two areas where parents are waiting for their kids after school, or before school as well, so that the parents are kind of invested in the site as well, so they can kind of interact with those sites daily, sharing the weeding, the watering, and the plant selection too. You can do a survey or a poll with the parents. And then last but not least, the traffic issue. I haven't heard much today about how we're resolving the Kirk Road, that light, the Columbia issue, and this parking lot getting bogged down. So we kind of split the grades into 3 separate groups. So kindergarten would get picked up after school up here right in front of the kindergarten building. So that's kind of like where they would meet, where they get picked up. Half of the school children here would meet at the little proposed garden area right next to the parking lot, and the other half would meet farther south towards the garden. So they'll have some time after school to interact with the garden, kind of promoting more of that daily use of the garden space as opposed to the once a week or.
And then also like their walk to like the meeting spot, so that it's like after school, it's like you're ready to just get up, and instead of it just being a quick exit, they're actually taking a walk through the trail to get to their collection point.
So it serves as a calming and meditative moment before you exit one part of your day to a new part of your day.
And then we took it like even one level above that, which is like we don't know. If everybody's only driving down this direction and then trying to make this right turn, or then coming here, that you could actually, in the same way that like school busing and zoning gets done, you could make recommendations that people drive north, up South Columbia and turn, so you're able to actually like really regulate the flow of traffic and how people, so that not everybody's taking the same route. It's kind of incorporating.
Also identifying communal meeting places. So if at the corner of Columbia and I think that's Memorial, people are dropping their children off and you're filling up an entire car instead of taking all the multiple cars with one child in, that you'll lessen congestion as well. And then working with the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition to get bike racks installed, and possibly working together with them and the city of Decatur to implement bike lanes, because the school may be willing to utilize bike lanes a lot, and there's an advocacy project that can happen that the whole community can be involved in, that ultimately solves the congestion problem here and allows children and families to be more in their bodies by bike.
Let's see, check. I think we're good with conceptual master plan, yeah. So
we did that.
now we're gonna move on to our detailed garden design.
Okay, well, in our detailed garden design, we've done, several things. Let's start over here by our house, where we've also proposed a rain garden over here and a swale, because it's on a downslope, and so we're basically trying to catch and prevent as much water from concentrating into this path over here. However, because there's always an overflow, and so there's going to be, I think the series of swales throughout the property, we were trying to address it from the top down and kind of minimizing it along the way, because this is one of the muddiest paths. But then also using fruit trees, planting 6 fruit trees with like about 15 feet between each one that are really heavy consumers of water, and so then that would, and then also would create kind of a natural barrier to the cinder block building that is our house, so it's kind of just create a more visual blockade, and also incorporating, so that then, of course, both could then kind of benefit and use from the fruit that would then be developing. A key part here that we discussed is kind of the need for sort of a community liaison, so that somebody is going through and actually making these, showing these plans and bringing in the people from our house and making the suggestion that they install rainwater harvesting and catchment stuff, so that they have, because obviously the space over there is massive, so and they're not catching any of it, and it's really such a cinder blocky looking building that all of that water is just flowing down here and producing all of that problem that we see over here. So really talking to them, kind of just bringing them on board. I mean, it doesn't, they're, and involving them in the, not only in like the kind of the designing from an aesthetic, but from their ability to actually help their kids enhance their education, because these are all, and then also have access to the garden.
So the proposed is that we would take down the fence.
Yeah, we want to take down the fence.
We want to take down the fence and use
Actually, yeah,
the trees as the barrier, but that it's still open and inviting to the children to come in. And we understand that that may not be possible, and if they don't agree to it, we have some remedies to still make them feel welcome to the garden space, even though they said no, because they have the right to do that. But that's, the community liaison person would really work to foster that relationship so that they felt compelled and had understood the benefits of not having that fence there.
Yeah. So it's like a community liaison / permaculture person that would be able to really bring in and just foster this sense of community, and how that like involves both the people, the environment, and the physical spaces. So it's like all those three working together. So then, okay, in between the fruit trees, we were talking about doing some berry bushes, and they will go over the plant list in a little bit, but let's just move into what we kind of did in the physical space of the garden. So these over here are going to be the trees. This is the magnolia tree that's over here, and then these are the main, like kind of the largest trees. This is the one that gives the most shade. So we've made first the recommendation that the tree stump circle that is usually over here gets moved to be fully under the tree, so you can really use that shaded space and be able to have an outdoor classroom and be able to, so basically this garden is kind of moving in the direction of being an outdoor classroom. So we want to move the stumps over here, and then also create at some point little chessboards that can be put on top of the stumps, and having like interactive game boards that can then be stored over here. So this is going to be the moving of this. Now over here what we've done is the oven, we'd like to fix and renovate and figure out what is wrong with it. It's just been concrete has been filled in, so there's no funnel, but getting the oven working. Now the tool shed, of course, is an immovable feature. However, it's not catching any rainwater, and just that little tool shed would be able to produce. I mean, there are 4 inches of rain in Georgia a year on average. I mean, per month, on average, all year long. So that would produce about 175 gallons of water a month. Right now, the water tote is over here, and there's little pails. So we're actually wanting to move the water tote over here, collecting the rainwater from the tool shed, having another water tote installed so that we would have a capacity for 500 gallons. And then this little lovely structure right here, which other groups did bring up on, we'd like to take out that shed that's over here and repurpose it, and basically build a multi-purpose shaded open air so it would be open from all 4 sides, with that kind of transparent corrugated plastic thing. There will be a roof because there will be a tree that will be coming through the center of it, but then bringing the work table that's over here and putting it on, and actually having it be like a kitchen space, being able to work with the things, but having more of a shaded element there, because clearly in the sun, this is the high sun zone of like even the entire site.
And what happens there is when food is harvested, that's where it's getting washed and prepared to go wherever it's gonna go. It can also be used as a food demo site. It's so close to the oven, possibly a grill can go in there, so now you're able to host events in a really formal way. So fundraisers can be hosted in the garden now with the food and beverage element, and the children are learning how to actually work in a kitchen space that's outdoors, and how minimal or how that's slightly different when you don't have things as easily accessible like electricity, but if you have a generator that can also be stored in the tool shed, how that simply changes the way the space is utilized, and the benefits that come out of it.
But we do like this. So this little old school pump, hand pump. So basically that the water totes would then be connected to a hand pump, and the physical element of kids actually moving their bodies, and like you needing to give them assignments in the garden. And so doing some pumping action. So the pump would be then connected to a hose, is really like this. So you would probably need to do, like about 50 pumps to get about 20 gallons of water. And so then we would have a hose that you'd be able to roll out. So there's somebody that's needing to roll, there's somebody that's needing to pump, and then being able to drag the hose over here. This over here is the chicken coop, which apparently is over here right now. So the chickens are back and it's moved.
And we've checked with the child labor laws, it's covered under the school curriculum.
So that's really like this, and really kind of, that's gonna be a key part of like an outdoor classroom space, where you're not just doing the work in the garden, weeding, planting. The cold frames here we're keeping, so actually having that be a very active part of like germinating seeds and then transplanting them over. But then having just multiple shaded spots that could then be used for extending like the work in the garden essentially. With a nice little picnic table in the space that this tree stump used to be as well.
And then murals along the wall to make it more welcoming as well, and it's good for pictures. So, you know, when you need to build your social media presence up, having somewhere where you can take really pretty pictures against murals, and it allows you to work with local artists as well. So now you're engaging various community members and in the area, but also external, just in the city of Atlanta and Decatur. And it brings more awareness about the school's presence to people who wouldn't have known it existed just by adding that artistic
And
element.
we want like this, like the mural can be on the asphalt. Right now it's used as a gaming, so there's a 4 square, so we wanna add more games into the asphalt, which we actually don't wanna touch at all. We just wanna incorporate more games on there since there's already 4 square that's out there. And then so that we could use that as a community mural, and then the fence, we sit here putting up some potted climbing plants, so we're like making it more of like a green vertical space. You wanna, somebody, who else wants to do, who wants to do that? You wanna do it? You wanna do it?
Compost?
Yeah.
So at the end of the driveway, where that civil is, it's concrete. I'm sorry, excuse me. And so we talked about setting up a system with compost wheels so that we can create our own compost.
So the reason that it would be at the end of the gravel path so the car could go in, so we really didn't wanna alter that. We talked about busting it up and jackhammering, but we were really budget conscious, just because I
Yeah,
think we
and-
worked in NGOs and we're very aware of like kind of budgetary constraints, so jackhammering up an very useful piece of asphalt is probably not going to happen. And so, although we at first said we wanted the shed over here, and then we moved it back over here, and so like we wanted to keep this open so that a truck could come in and easily have to do like, you know, turn and do whatever it is that they have to do.
So also, the concrete surface is useful for compost and keeping the leachate in, which was talked about when we visited a compost wheel site.
Do you wanna talk about that?
Yeah, so it's not really depicted on here because it's getting a little busy. But basically, this is a divergent swale that will be the overflow from the rain garden in that little valley behind to the west of our house. So basically, it'll go here, kind of like behind where the trees are, or in this area, and it'll feed into this little muddy garden area that. Yeah, it'll turn into a marshland basically.
We wanna
We'll
turn it
keep
into a
it
mini
under the
marshland.
flood. Not depth wise, there's no like drowning hazards, but so it'll be constantly soggy. And when that fills up, because there will be heavy rains, it'll be kind of like a backwards motion of the water that will then allow it to go under that boardwalk area, so that the water's not spilling out all here and creating a big mess. And we can talk about the plant list a little bit right now. We found about 90 species that we felt would work well in this garden space. We were trying to create as many different polycultures as possible. I'm not going to read you off all the Latin names because I know we're all kind of winging a bit, but I'll just mention a couple of the different areas and a few of the species in each of those areas. So the potted climbing plants, these will be physical pots that are on the asphalt. In case you didn't notice, this wall actually has like a mesh netting above it. So it's like a perfect climbing surface for muscadines, some playful honeysuckle, some magnolia vine. Magnolia vine is like the most crazy plant I've ever read about. It has 5 different flavors apparently, like in the one bite.
Traditional Chinese medicinal herb. And it has the 5 flavors.
Coolest flowers you've ever seen. We'll just Google it after
It's useful
this.
for like everything.
Some peoples in modern day Russia in the east, they actually used this plant when they were going out on hunting expeditions. They would help them with like night vision. It would help them. That's the lore at least.
Yeah, every fall, my dad would boil up a bunch of eggs with the
was to help us prevent getting colds over the winter.
Cool.
Did it work? I don't know. I guess maybe.
So yeah, common cold, night vision, frost burn, just like they use it for kind of everything. It's good for apparently lung and kidney health. It helps balance your chi. It helps balance the yin and yang of your kidneys apparently. That's all Chinese traditional medicine. So that's kind of what we have envisioned for this wall here. And then in the marshland, we were picturing some native water-loving hydrophilic plants, such as like arrowhead, which you can kind of just stick a stick into the marsh and dislodge the tubers, and they'll float up, and those tubers are edible. And then there's like cattails, which basically every part of a cattail, y'all know what a cattail is, right? Stick, cattail. You can use that plant for like, any part of that plant you can use in a different medicinal or edible fashion. So it would be a really good one to have in our marsh area. And then in terms of like these different beds, we would have different polycultures, and we can mention a few of those in a moment. But I just want to mention like one guild that I thought would be super interesting. We all know about the Three Sisters. It's corn, which is like your vertical pole, and then you have some sort of a beam that goes trellises up the corn, and then you have a ground cover, like squash. So a perennial alternative to that might be sunchoke, which is like a big sunflower that has tubers underneath, and then having like a scarlet red runner bean, which is a perennial bean, and then having like strawberries underneath. So you can kind of mix and match these different plants to try to see what sort of functional guilds you can create. So that was just kind of a fun one I thought I'd put in your minds for a moment. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about polycultures, why we want to encourage polycultures, and a few of the different species mixes.
Okay, so for each of the beds, we came up with a polyculture. Some of them are the same. And I understand the polyculture to be plants that have a beneficial relationship and occupy different root zones. And it works as a ground cover. So the ground is constantly covered. And then throughout the plant's growth, you harvest a beet, and then within that hole you would plant some kind of leafy green maybe. So one that I know would be lettuces, beets, and carrots together. And so you're continuously harvesting and planting seasonally. And we think that's important for soil health, and also really educational for the children.
So,
Wait, before we get, well, I've noticed an error. So I said raised beds here, but we had this whole discussion, and we'll take you through our pros and cons of raised beds, so we'll just take it as a point of discussion. We wanted to have raised beds because it looks nice and neat, and like it looks really clean and like this, but then the cons of that are, one, the drainage of the water, and so needing to water more, and then the fact that we're kind of limited of we have one person in charge plus students, and so like we wanted to create a system which would be hugel beds, which would not require as much watering as much as the raised beds. Also in terms of just like maintaining like the soil, I mean there's going to be a soil expense that you're going to have to do to put in fertilizers and keep that soil healthy, which when it's in the ground you're not necessarily having to do that. And so we are not doing raised beds, and we are going to be we thought like once we did that hugel bed here, that hugel beds would probably be the best option for one, super hot days where you're not necessarily getting as much rain, and you kind of really want to maximize the retention of water in that growing area. So these are not raised beds, they are hugel beds / regular beds, but having a nice maybe demarcated stone border, just so that when you look at it, you can just see the differences between each one, and then also incorporating more signage there, so that like now, I mean, kale is over here, for example, and cabbage, and so, but we don't have anything that's marking it, so I think that'd be a fun classroom project to actually have markers of where things are. So if like bean tomatoes, I mean, there's like the tomato things over here, and beans, and so whether we end up doing multiple veggies in one bed, but just having it kind of marked in a nice, friendly, hand kitty illustrated way. Really pretty.
So the great thing about this project is it's cost-wise is really, really low, particularly in comparison to some of the other areas that need focus. So it's extremely realistic and can legit start in April and be done by September, right? And that's in 3 different phases. I think at cost, without any in-kind, it was $8,000 with all the in-kind, with various relationships that already exist that can be made. With the compost relationship, you can save more than half of that and do the whole project for about $3,000. And that's with paying people. If you were paying people, paying volunteers and the community liaison, that's with paying them a livable wage of $15 an hour. That would be in kind. But just thinking, I think when you're thinking about a global perspective in the Waldorf philosophy, that teaching them that people's work is very valuable, despite minimum wage being, legal, but that people's ability to live is really important, and so valuing their labor. Nonetheless, all of that would be in kind anyway, but just knowing that when we budgeted, it was done at a livable wage. The 3 phases, one starting in April, is a relationship building and reimagining phase. So this is where you're building your relationship with Compost Wheel, with the tree service company, with the pallet company, with our house, with the church, right? And you need to get that off the ground and reestablish those relationships and establish those relationships, because you need those relationships to make the entire project work. You're also installing things that need to happen on the front end. So your rain garden, you're planting your fruit trees, you're identifying who your community liaison is gonna be, you're hiring your herd so that they can get to that work. It takes them some time. And then you're securing some relationships with Hands On Atlanta. So that's where another volunteer base is gonna come from, and that only costs $100 a year, and you get access to volunteers for an entire year, as well as the Atlanta Tool Bank. So you no longer have to purchase the tools. You get to pay a $50 membership, and you get access to tools the entire year round. So those, although they cost, there's a point of price there, you're still saving a lot of money, because you don't have to rent things, you don't have to hire people. Phase 2 starts in July, and it's an implementation and installation stage. So you're dismantling the greenhouse and relocating it to the garden area. You're building the open air multi-purpose room, renovating the garden, installing the kitchen. You're creating the creek walk because the herd has done their job. You're installing the boardwalk, relocating tree stumps. You're planting, and you're assessing your water solutions and assessing, I'm sorry, you're not doing any of that because that's already been done. And then you have,
You're continuously assessing.
well, yeah, so you're continuously assessing those areas to make sure that it's working, right? So when we were down there, the last time we were in class, the gravel was not all the way paved out, and we almost weren't gonna do the boardwalk, but I'm glad we did, and going down today and noticing that even with the gravel, it's still muddy. So you're constantly assessing those kind of situations. And then the final stage, which is your final touches, you're building your bird hotels, you're making signage for your trails, you're finalizing the garden beds, you're painting your murals, and this is where you get all the children involved in those processes based on what age group that they fall in. So they're watching the process all along, and then they get to put their final touches on it, and feel really empowered with contributing to those processes, and knowing that they are ultimately the ones that benefit the most from it.
And then ending with like a big celebration in the garden.
You have an open house or a fundraiser where all the people
where everyone is invited, and you're getting to see this revamped space, and that's inviting and educational and useful and open to everybody. That's it.
Thank you.
Any questions?
What's a Google bed?
Okay. So, basically, when you have a garden bed, you're tilling it, whether it's by hand or with a rototiller, and then you're amending it with a top layer of compost or something, and planting directly in the ground. if you're doing a raised bed, you're literally putting sides up, putting walls, and infilling with topsoil and compost and planting above grade, basically, above your surrounding soil level. So a hugel bed kind of tries to integrate the benefits of both of those systems by first trenching out the bottom of the bed, and then infilling that with different organic matter, layering it with carbon and nitrogen layers, and then over time that will form a nice rich topsoil for your plants. And you can also mound that up so it is a little higher, kind of like a raised bed, so you're not bending down as much, but it has the benefit of being really great at moisture retention, which is kind of the big con to raised beds because the water drains very quickly. But yeah, so that's basically what a hugel bed is.
Thanks. I have a question. So are you recommending that cars be able to drive like all the way down that driveway?
So it'd be more like it'd meet up in the top corner here. So I mean the parking lot's right here basically.
And the parking lot is actually, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit further. Like we have here is the edge of our house. And so really we're talking about the pickup point being at like the left corner and then the right corner. So that you would have people coming in here, being able to fill and then turning and then coming in, and then that would be a different collection point.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I like the compost wheel idea because I think that'd be a cool curriculum addition. Where would so you're saying have this place be like one of the farms where they actually are piling up all the compost, turning it, and then the school, or is it who owns the area you're talking about?
Technically, this area I believe belongs to our house or the church.
Church.
Okay.
Sure. That's why it's like really having everyone on board for this, so
Right.
it's not just Waldorf waste that's going in here, everybody's being able to use it. I mean, and this is basically, it's like the linchpin of the idea, not everybody's on board.
So are you saying that you'll have a compost pile and compost wheel will pick it up and then take it to some of their locations, or actually like where this would become like that farm?
It's a
you
site.
visited? Okay.
It'd
it's
be a site, and so we get free compost for allowing it. We'd also ask for certain parameters because it's not residential, but it is a business space that isn't a farm. So we would discuss some different parameters so that the pile isn't too high, and that we have some different kind of control over it,
And it's not
enclosing it to some
necessary.
extent, so it's not a sore eye, but it would be one of those sites.
Cool. I like that.
Yeah. I mean this area here, it's kind of a brush pile right now. It's lots of cut down trees and branches and stuff. So this can be cleared and
Right.
there's actually plenty of space back there. Final words?
I really like how you're taking the shed that's right by the glade and then actually incorporating the tree in its use in the garden, because it's bringing structure to nature.
And yeah, I mean, I think this picture is like, I was like pretty excited to find that. It's like exactly, because you need a space for the tree to go up the thing, but then it would be roofed all. And it's a very simple structure. I mean, it wouldn't be like, it wouldn't have like foundations in the ground. I mean, it's just four
But it means
posts
if it's
built up against
raining,
the tree.
you can still be out there, and we know we do get summer rains in Georgia, so it doesn't mean it has to stop.
But it would have to build at a slight angle for the water catchment.
The other part I like is you're talking about associating water coming from the earth versus just from some pipes. And I just think it's a cool concept. I mean, you think about in all the places water comes out everywhere. You know, if there's like, you know, making it all wood textured, or, you know, putting moss all over a water fountain or something, some cool concept like that. So I like that idea too.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
Where's the, I guess, proposed location exactly for the well?
I think it would depend on whoever the contractor is or whoever it is who would be able to locate the site, because I'm not entirely sure if there is 100% verified
This
that
was
there's
a
a
well
well.
exploration initiative.
Oh,
So we're proposing
I
make
mean,
the
yeah, it's just like
expedition.
once we've put in all of the swales and once we've like the second, we're trying to address as much of the runoff as possible. And then in, 6 or 8 months, we still find that there's an incredible amount of water, then we can see what's happening underneath and whether it's connected to the creek, and that has something to do with it. So it's kind of in stages.